Taeyong realizes it's a trap the moment his big black car slides off the hard asphalt onto the slippery, bumpy planks of the old pier. It's too late. He slams on the brakes, but the tires only whine, losing their grip on the rotten wood. A deafening roar fills his ears as the railing breaks. A few seconds of weightlessness, fear digging into his throat like a cold claw, and then, impact. The world turns upside down. Spin, scenes, and rings. Glass shatters inward. Taeyong's head hits the side window hard, and for a second, everything goes dark. The car lies on its roof, rocking like a heavily wounded animal. Acrid smoke billows from under the hood. Mixing with the smell of gasoline and old seawater, he comes to from a sharp pain that spreads throughout his body. At first, he doesn't understand where he is. Then his memory returns in fragments. The meeting, the betrayal, the chase, and then this, the fall. Taeyong tries to move. It's no use. He's pinned between the driver's seat and the car's ceiling, which has now become the floor. The seatbelt digs into his chest, holding him in an awkward position. He struggles to free one hand and fumbles for the door handle. He pulls. The door won't budge, crushed by the weight of the car on impact. He tries the other door. Same story. The trunk? No, access is blocked. Panic rises from his stomach, hot and sticky. He breathes faster, tries to calm down. Think! You have to think! He scans the area. The windshield is a web of cracks, but it hasn't shattered. The side windows are broken, but the openings are too small to squeeze through. He's trapped in a metal cage in the middle of an empty, dark port. No one. Silence. Only the soft creaking of metal, the hiss of the cooling engine, and his own ragged breathing. At first, he thinks he's hallucinating, from the blow to his head. But no. A face appears in the triangular shard of the less broken side window. Small, dark, freckled. Wide, dark eyes stare at him without fear, with childish curiosity. A girl. She looks about 6 years old. She's standing outside, crouched, looking straight at him. Taeyeon blinks, trying to clear her mind. The girl hasn't disappeared. She's wearing a bright pink jacket, the hood pulled down her back, her curly hair peeking out from under her hat. Her face holds a quiet, serious expression. Hey, Taeyeon croaks. His voice sounds alien, broken. Hey, baby. Call someone. The girl doesn't answer right away. She tilts her head slightly, studying him. Are you in pain? She asks finally. Her voice is clear and ringing, cutting through the oppressive silence. Taeyong manages to say with difficulty, It hurts. The car won't open. I need help. The girl looks at him, and her gaze takes on a very mature, understanding look. She sees his plight, sees the blood on his face, sees how he's helplessly trying to push the door open. Don't cry, sir, she suddenly says very softly. Taeyong blinks. Cry? He doesn't. He hasn't even considered it. There's no room for tears in his world, but there's no mockery in her words. Only sincere, simple consolation. My mother will save you, the girl continues, as if stating the most obvious fact in the world. She's strong. She can do anything, Taeyeon asks hurriedly, hopefully. At home. I was out for a walk. I saw the car fall. I ran to get Mom. She'll be home soon. Just don't leave. With these words, she stands up and straightens her jacket. You're not leaving? She asks again, just to make sure. No, Taeyong croaks, something like a laugh creeping into his voice. I'm not going anywhere. Okay, I'll be there soon. She turns and runs away, her tiny sneakers tapping a crisp rhythm on the wet boards. Taeyong watches her until she disappears into the twilight. He's left alone. With her promise in his head, now the silence becomes unbearable. Every second feels like an hour. He lies upside down, and the blood rushes to his head, intensifying the pain. A cold autumn rain begins to drizzle. Drops hit the upturned underbody of the car, fly inside through the broken windows, and mix with the blood on his face. He tries to move, to stretch his numb limbs, but the space is too tight. Every breath is labored, his rib aches with every movement. He thinks, who did this? Which of his own people decided to eliminate him? His thoughts are jumbled. Images of the past overlap with the present. He sees faces, hears words that now seem like lies. He remembers the girl. Tammy. I think that's what she introduced herself as when he asked. Her simple confidence. Mom will save you. But what if she doesn't? What if she's simply scared and doesn't come back? What if her mother, seeing the overturned car and the bloodied man, simply calls the police? For Taeyong, that's almost as bad as staying here. The noise of the city drifts here, from the other end of the port, muffled and distant. A siren, laughter, a ship's horn. Here, trapped in his metal, there is only his breathing, the patter of the rain, and the haunting rustle of thoughts. He closes his eyes. His strength is draining. All he can do is wait. He hears footsteps, not quick and light, like a girl's, but confident, heavy, a woman's. Taeyong opens his eyes sharply, tenses despite the pain. A woman approaches the car. She's tall, wearing a simple dark windbreaker and work pants tucked into heavy boots. Her hair is pulled back into a bun. In one hand, she holds a flashlight, its beam capturing the crumpled side of the car, the broken glass, and his face from the darkness. In her other hand, she holds Tammy's hand tightly. The woman's face is focused but calm. There's no panic in her eyes, only a quick, sharp assessment of the situation. She doesn't approach too closely, stopping a few meters away and examining the car from all sides, checking its stability. Then her gaze returns to Taeyong. "Are you conscious?" she asks. Her voice is low, firm, and unwavering. "Yes," Taeyong answers. "Are you moving? Can you feel your legs?" He tries to wiggle his toes and feels a tingling sensation. "I feel it, but I'm trapped. The doors won't open." The woman, Yannicka, nods. She lets go of her daughter's hand. "Tammy, take 3 steps back. Stay there. Don't come any closer, understand?" "I understand, Mom," the girl says obediently and steps back. Only now does Yannicka come closer. She squats down next to the broken window, shining her flashlight inside, scanning the space, his position, the traces of blood. Her movements are precise and professional. She doesn't waste time on empty questions like, "How are you feeling?" She looks for the facts. "Is there any severe pain anywhere other than your ribs?" she asks, the flashlight beam sliding down his legs, trapped under the steering wheel. "Head and shoulder, mostly ribs. Could the car catch fire? Can you smell the gasoline?" Taeyong sniffs. "There's a pungent odor, but is it strong?" He's no connoisseur. "Not sure." Yannicka frowns. She walks around the car again, looking at the stains underneath. The leak doesn't seem to be severe. Then she returns to him. "You're pinned between the steering wheel and the seat. The door is crushed. I need tools and help to move this pile of metal. I'll be right back. Can you hold on?" There's no doubt in her words that he might not last. It's simply a question, a statement. "Yes," Taeyong says, and there's more certainty in the word than he feels. "Okay, Tammy, come with me, quickly." She takes the girl's hand and they walk away again, leaving him alone. But now he's no longer in complete despair. Now there's a plan. There's a firm voice that said, "I'll be back." And there's a little girl in a pink jacket who, turning as she runs, shouts into the darkness, "See, I told you so." Yannicka leads Tammy at a brisk pace away from the rusty docks. Her mind is filled with vivid images: an overturned car, the pale face of a stranger with white hair, blood on her temple, a cowering body. She feels a familiar chill of fear in her stomach. Memory brings back another image. Her brother, on the same old dock, 10 years ago. No one came then. No one helped. She wasn't there. Tammy practically runs alongside him, her little feet mincing to keep up. "Mom, are we going to come back? Is he badly hurt?" she asks. And there's no fear in her voice, only concern. So childish, so direct. Yannicka says curtly, "She's made her decision. Not now, this very second." It came back then, when she saw in his eyes not anger or a threat, but simply pain, and the same doom that was in her brother's eyes in that old photograph. She can't leave him, not because of him, because of Tammy, so that her daughter can see that people help each other, so that she doesn't grow up in a world where people can pass her by, and also because of her brother. To close this circle, to break it once and for all, they walk up to their old SUV, parked at the foot of the curb. Janica places her daughter in the passenger seat. "Stay here. Don't go anywhere until I get back." "But I want to help," Tammy protests. "You already helped. You found him and brought me. That's the important part. Now it's my job. Deal?" Tammy nods, a little upset but understanding. Yannicka opens the trunk. Her emergency kit is always there. A first aid kit, lights, flashlights, a rope, a couple of tools, and a blanket. She grabs a strong steel rope with hooks, some gloves, and runs back to the docks. She returns to the car faster than Taeyong expected. Hearing footsteps, he opens his eyes again. "I'm here," Yannicka says, as if giving a password. She lowers herself down next to the gap by the back door, which has opened a couple of centimeters. "How's your breathing? Still the same?" "Still the same," he croaks. "Here." She holds out a small plastic bottle of water through the gap. Taeyong catches it with difficulty. His fingers are stiff. The bottle almost slips. He nevertheless brings it to his lips and takes a few small sips. The water seems incredibly delicious, cold and clean. It washes away the taste of blood and fear. "Thank you," he says, handing the bottle back. "Save your strength," says Yannicka. "I'll pull you out, but it will take time. The car is heavy. My rope might not grip it properly. I might have to find a foothold. I can't pay you anything," Taeyong says unexpectedly. In his world, everything has a price, and help is no exception. "I don't need it," Yannicka answers dryly. She's already on her feet, examining the frame of the car, looking for a place to attach the hook. "I'm not doing this for you." She finds a relatively intact section of the frame under the rear bumper. She throws a hook in there, testing it. It seems to hold. She drags the other end of the rope further away, to a massive iron bollard that once served as a mooring post for boats. She wraps the rope around it several times, securing it. The mechanics are simple. Her SUV will pull, and the bollard will act as a fulcrum, creating leverage to lift the side of the car. She runs back to her car. Tammy sits with her nose pressed to the glass, watching. Yannicka starts the engine and slowly drives to the spot where the tow rope lies. She hooks it to the tow bar. Everything is ready. Now comes the most dangerous moment. If you pull too hard or in the wrong direction, you could flip the car back on top of whoever's inside, or break the tow hook. She gets out and approaches Taeyong's trap. "Listen carefully," she says firmly. "I'm going to pull very slowly. The car will move. It might be loud. Your task is, as soon as there's room, unbuckle your seatbelt and climb out the back door, the one that's slightly open. Can you do it?" "I can," Taeyong says. He seems more focused. The water and Yannicka's actions have brought some clarity back to him. Yannicka climbs into her SUV. She shifts into first gear. The car jerks, the cable tightens, making a clanking sound. At first, nothing happens. Then there's the scraping sound of metal on asphalt. Taeyong feels his world rock. The side of the car, pressed to the ground, lifts off a few centimeters with a terrifying squeal. "Right now!" Yannicka shouts from the window, but continues to move slowly forward. The gap by the back door widens. Taeyong presses the seatbelt release button with the last of his strength. The belt snaps open, and he falls to the ceiling and floor, onto a pile of glass. Pain in his side pierces him like a knife. He clenches his teeth, crawls towards the door. His fingers dig into the edge of the doorway. He pulls. The door gives way, opening another 20 centimeters with a rusty creak. That's enough. He stretches out like a worm, clinging to the wet asphalt outside. He crawls out first waist deep, then stretches out his legs. Cold rain immediately lashes his face. He is free. "Ready?" he shouts at the top of his lungs. Yannicka immediately stops the car, reverses to release the rope. She jumps out and runs toward him. Taeyong lies on the wet, dirty asphalt, unable to move. The rain beats against his face, but he doesn't even try to shield himself. He just breathes, deeply, wheezingly, feeling the air fill his lungs without restriction. Each breath causes pain in his ribs, but it's a good pain, the pain of a living person. He lies and looks at the low gray sky, at the sparse yellow lights of distant street lamps. He is outside the cage. His consciousness is slightly fuzzy, ebbs and flows, but he holds on. He hears approaching footsteps. Yannicka is standing next to him. She looks down at him, her silhouette blocking part of the sky. Rain runs down her cheeks, but she pays no attention. She holds the flashlight in her hands again. She shines it in his face, not blinding him, but simply checking his pupils. Then the beam slides down his body, assessing the visible damage. Now he sees her clearly. A young, sculpted face with high cheekbones and a firm chin. Her eyes are dark, very attentive. There is no pity or fear in them. There is weariness, determination, and something else, very deep at the bottom that he cannot read. She is strong, not with physical strength, although that is evident in the way she handled the rope, with strength of spirit, a calm, unfailing confidence in what she does. "Are you okay?" she asks. "I think so," he answers. His voice sounds a little stronger. "Can you get up?" "I'll try." He leans on his elbows, trying to rise. The world swims before his eyes. Yannicka instantly drops to one knee, offering her shoulder. He grabs it, and without another word, she rises, taking his weight. They stand like that for a second, he swaying, she steady as a rock. He holds on to her, trying to find his balance. Everything hurts. His head, his shoulder, especially his side. He takes a cautious step, then another. He can walk, but slowly and with support. Yanika leads him away from the overturned car, from this scene of disaster. They approach her SUV. Tammy has already opened the back door and is looking at them with wide eyes. "Mom, he's saved!" the girl exclaims joyfully. "Yes," says Yanika. "Help me sit him down." With Tammy's help, who gives him a serious push from the other side, they get Taeyong into the back seat. He sinks into the worn but clean upholstery with relief. Yanika closes the door behind him. She stands in the rain for a second, looking at her daughter, then at the pale stranger in the back seat. She sighs, a deep sigh that seems to release all the tension of the last hour. Then she nods. She nods toward the car, toward the front seat next to her daughter, then at Taeyong. A simple, clear gesture. That's it. She offers to take him, without asking where, without suggesting the hospital or the police. Just get him out of here, out of this dangerous, open place. She's already made her choice, to help, and now she's going to see it through. She walks around the car, gets behind the wheel, and turns the key. The engine starts on the first crank. She glances in the rearview mirror. Her gaze meets Taeyong's. She simply stares, silently asking, "Are you ready?" He nods slightly. He's ready. Anywhere, just as far away from this dock. Yanika turns on the headlights, and two yellow beams cut through the drizzly darkness. She moves smoothly, taking him away from a past that almost ended, into an unknown present. The car moves slowly through the night city. The windshield wipers monotonously sweep the light rain off the windshield. There's almost no sound inside the cabin, just the steady hum of the engine and the occasional squeal of the brakes on turns. Taeyong sits back in his seat, looking out the window. The city lights float past, blurred by the rain. He feels every bump in the road with every cell of his battered body. The pain is now clear and localized, throbbing in his temple, aching in his left side, aching in his shoulder. But it's bearable. He's alive. He's not trapped. He feels someone's eyes on him. He slowly turns his head. Tammy, in the front passenger seat, has turned on her side and is looking at him through the gap between the seats. Her large eyes seem even larger in the dim light. She's not smiling, just studying him with a quiet, childish curiosity. "Are you still in pain?" she asks in a whisper, as if afraid to break the silence. Taeyong answers just as quietly. His own voice sounds hoarse and unfamiliar. "Mom will fix everything," Tammy says confidently. "We have some green paint and some teddy bear bandages at home." Yanika, sitting behind the wheel, says nothing. She simply looks at the road, her hands resting confidently on the wheel. She doesn't ask questions. She doesn't ask who he is, what happened, where he's going. She simply drives him. This silent confidence of hers affects Taeyong more powerfully than any questions. In his world, silence is often more dangerous than shouting. Here, however, it seems safe. They stop at a low brick building in a quiet, low-income neighborhood. The street is deserted, the streetlights dim. Yanika gets out and helps Taeyong out. Her support is firm and unwavering. Tammy jumps out on the other side and runs forward, toward the entrance. The apartment is on the ground floor. The hallway is small and narrow. It smells clean, of some kind of soft soap, and the faintest hint of food, maybe soup or stewed vegetables. Everything is very simple, but neat. Old but clean furniture, books on the shelf, a few children's drawings on the refrigerator, stuck with magnets. On the floor is a worn but bright rug. This is not wealth. This is comfort. This is home. Yanika leads him into the living room and seats him on the old but soft sofa. He sinks into it, his body relaxing with relief. "Sit," she says simply. "Don't move. Tammy, get a small basin from the bathroom, warm water, and towels. And the first aid kit." The girl instantly disappears into the hallway, joyfully stamping her feet. She is clearly proud of her mission. Yanika returns from the bedroom wearing a loose sweater. She squats down in front of him and opens an old metal first aid kit. It's neatly organized. Bandages, plasters, a bottle of antiseptic, and scissors. "Show me where the worst is," she says. Taeyong silently points to his temple, where the blood has caked, and to his side. Yanika nods. She doesn't touch him right away. First, she wets a clean cloth in a basin of warm water. Then, carefully, almost weightlessly, she begins to wipe his face, washing away the dirt and blood. Her movements are precise, professional. She doesn't hurt. Taeyong asks quietly. "No," she answers just as quietly, without looking up from her work. "I studied at one point. I worked in a hospice. That's where I learned. She washes the cut on his temple, applying antiseptic. He winces at the slight burning sensation. She works quickly and carefully. Then she moves on to his hands, where he had torn the skin trying to escape. She washes them and applies a bandage. You need to take off your shirt, she says more firmly. Look at your ribs. He tries to unbutton the buttons himself, but his fingers are stiff. Yannicka doesn't say a word, simply pushes his trembling hands away and unbuttons them herself. Her fingers are cold and quick. She examines the large bruise spreading down his sides. She carefully probes his ribs. It's unlikely to be broken, she concludes. It's just a bad bruise. You'll be sore for a week. Breathe deeply if you can. If you feel a sharp pain when you inhale, tell me. She takes out an elastic bandage and wraps it tightly, but without squeezing, around his chest for support. She remains silent the entire time, completely focused on the task at hand. There's no awkwardness in her silence. There's only her complete concentration on helping. By the time she finishes, Tammy is already dozing, curled up in the chair. Yannicka covers her daughter with a blanket and returns to Taeyong. You'll stay here tonight, she says. It's not a question, but a statement of fact. You're in no condition to go anywhere. You need rest. We'll decide what to do next in the morning. Taeyong wants to object, to say that he's dangerous to them, that they might find him, but the words won't come. He's too exhausted, and her tone leaves no room for argument. It simply sounds concerned, devoid of sentimentality, but all the more real for it. The sofa is yours, she says, pointing to where he's sitting. I'll bring a pillow and a blanket. The toilet is at the end of the hall. You can drink the water. Are you hungry? He shakes his head. He has no time for food. Yannicka disappears and returns with bedding. She helps him lie down and covers him with a blanket. Her actions are simple and practical. Sleep, she says finally. You're safe. She turns off the light in the living room, leaving only a faint glow from the nightlight coming from the hallway, and leaves, quietly closing the door to her room behind her. Taeyong lies in the darkness. The pain has dulled, reduced to a dull, aching sound. He can't sleep. His brain, shut off by adrenaline, is now starting to work again. He analyzes the day, the betrayal, the fall, the girl, her mother, this apartment. It all seems like a dream, too unreal to be true. He lies and listens to the sounds of the house. The clock ticks in the kitchen. Water drips somewhere. From behind the door in the next room comes the quiet, even voice of Janika. She's reading a story to Tammy. Then comes the sound of children's laughter. Then silence. Then the creaking of the bed. Then a light snore, childish, carefree. These ordinary, peaceful sounds have a stronger effect on him than any sleeping pill. They create a shield, a barrier between him and the world outside. For the first time in years, he feels less like a predator in ambush and more like a simple man, tired, battered, but safe. Light filters into the room through the cracks in the curtains. Taeyong wakes to a smell, coffee, and something sweet, maybe pancakes. He lies still, listening. The clink of dishes in the kitchen is quiet. Tammy's voice is heard, a quick, cheerful conversation, to which Yannicka responds with short, calm phrases. Painkillers on the table next to the sofa. Regular ones. Over the counter. He takes them. After a while, Yannicka peeks into the living room. She's already dressed in simple jeans and a t-shirt, her hair pulled back together. Can you get up? Breakfast is ready, she says. He nods, and overcoming his stiffness, rises. He goes into the kitchen. The small table is set for 3. Simple plates, mugs. In the center is a stack of golden pancakes, jar of jam, butter. Yannicka silently gestures him to a chair. Tammy, already seated at the table, beams at him. Good morning, sir. Mom made pancakes. They eat breakfast almost in silence. Yannicka doesn't ask questions. She simply eats, occasionally admonishing Tammy not to smear jam all over the table. The silence isn't oppressive. It's calm, natural. Taeyong eats slowly, feeling the food replenish his strength. This simple breakfast in the small kitchen seems incredibly precious to him. After breakfast, Yannicka goes to wash the dishes. Tammy runs up to Taeyong, who is sitting carefully on the couch. Would you like to see my drawings? She asks, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. He nods. The girl brings a folder and lays out the pages in front of him. There are bright, naive drawings. A house, a sun with rays, a cat, a mother. Then she takes out one, clearly drawn this morning. It depicts a schematic of an overturned black car, next to a small figure in pink, and on the other side, a large figure in blue, pulling a rope, and all 3 are smiling. That's us? Tammy explains proudly, pointing. That's you. That's Mom saving, and that's me. She speaks to him easily, without a hint of fear or awkwardness. To her, he's not a dangerous stranger, not a boss from another world. He's simply Sir, the one they saved. This simple, pure logic of hers disarms Taeyong more than any threat. The day passes slowly and quietly. Yanika goes about her business. Washing, cleaning, mending. She offers Taeyong a pair of old but clean pants and a loose t-shirt to change his torn clothes. He takes a short, careful shower and feels almost human again. He watches. He watches their lives. He watches Tammy play on the floor, humming. He watches Yanika, sitting on the floor, mending the zipper on her daughter's backpack, her fingers deftly handling a needle and thread. He watches the quiet conversations over lunch, about what happened at kindergarten, about needing to buy bread. There's nothing superfluous in this life. No luxury, no ostentatious power, no constant vigilance. There's work, care, simple joys, and a quiet, deep connection between mother and daughter. Taeyong sits in the corner of the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, feeling like an alien from another planet. His world is built on money, fear, control, and constant readiness to strike. This world is built on something entirely different. And this different seems stronger than any steel and more precious than any money. He simply sits and breathes this world, absorbing its silence and simplicity like medicine. It's evening. Tammy's already in bed. The only lights in the small living room are a table lamp and an old television, where some program's images are silently scrolling. Yanika is sitting in a chair, holding a mug of tea. Taeyong is in his place on the sofa, also holding a cup of tea. The silence between them isn't oppressive, but it's full of the unspoken. Yanika isn't looking at him, but somewhere in front of her, at an old family photograph on the shelf. It shows her, about 10 years old, and a smiling teenager, with dark eyes like hers. My brother's name was Ethan, she says suddenly, her voice even but muffled. He was 17, 10 years ago. Taeyeon doesn't move, just looks at her, letting her speak. He was a good guy. He dreamed of becoming a mechanic. He loved old cars. She takes a sip of tea. One evening, he didn't come home. We found him on the same old pier where we found you, in an alley between the warehouses. He was trying to break up a fight, or rather, to help someone who was being beaten. He was the only one who came forward. She falls silent, her fingers tightly wrapped around the warm mug. They hit him on the head with something, and left him there. He died before the ambulance arrived. No one saw, no one knows who did it. The police found nothing. Now she turns her head and looks directly at Taeyong. There are no tears in her eyes, only the same deep, hardened pain he had sensed before. I wasn't there then. I was studying in another city. And ever since then I've thought, if just one person had stopped, called for help, just not passed by, maybe everything would have been different. That's why I can't pass by, even when it's scary. Especially when it's scary. I help not because I'm a saint, but because I can't do otherwise. Because I see myself in everyone who's in trouble. She takes another sip of tea and sets the mug down on the table. The conversation is over. She's said what she wanted to say. She's explained her law, the reason for her actions in that dark port. Silence fills the room again. But it's different now, heavy with her truth. Taeyong stares into his mug, at the brown liquid inside. His own truth presses against his chest, begging to be revealed. He'd never told anyone about himself. It was dangerous and pointless. But now, in this room, after her words, silence seems wrong, dishonest. I have problems too, he says very quietly, almost in a whisper. The words come with difficulty, as if he's forgotten how to pronounce them. Big ones, dangerous ones. Yannika doesn't interrupt. She simply looks at him, giving him time. Those people at the port, they weren't random robbers. This was a targeted attack, on me. He looks up at her. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, are now simply tired. I have things to do. Money, power, and enemies who want it all. They tried to take me out, and they almost succeeded. If it weren't for you and Tammy, he falls silent, unsure how to continue. How can he explain to her the world he lives in? A world of contracts, betrayals, constant threats. He doesn't mention the forbidden words, but the gist is clear. I'm not a good man, Yanika, he breathes. Not like your brother. In my world, you either strike a blow or wait to be struck. And I was the one who struck the blows. I'm the boss. The head of an organization. So when you found me, It wasn't just an accident, it was the end of one game and the beginning of another. And now those who did this are looking for me. To finish the job. He waits. Waits for fear, disgust, horror to appear in her eyes. Waits for her to realize the danger she's let into her home. Waits for her to grab her daughter and run away, or throw him out into the street. Yannicka doesn't move. Her face expresses neither fear nor surprise. It seems she already knew or guessed all this. She looks at him for a long moment, her gaze weighing, assessing. "I knew you weren't an ordinary person," she says finally. Her voice is still calm. "By the car, by the clothes, by the look in your eyes, by the way you tried to control everything, even when you were wounded. I've seen people like you, not bosses, but similar. People from a world where others ruled." She sighs, not looking away. "But you know what? I don't care." Taeyong blinks, not understanding. "You could be anyone," she continues. "A boss, a king, a criminal. But at that moment in the port, you were just a trapped man. Just a man in pain. And my daughter was there. She saw you. She saw that someone was suffering." Yannicka leans forward, her expression becoming very intense, very serious. "I didn't do this for you, Taeyeon. I did it for Tammy, so that from the age of 6, she would know that if someone is in trouble, you have to help, that you can't just ignore them, so that this truth would be ingrained in her forever, so that when she grows up and faces the choice, to help or to look away, there wouldn't even be a question in her mind, so that she would become the person my brother so desperately needed." She leans back in her chair, her face becoming composed again. "You say you're not a good person. Perhaps. I don't know your life. I can't judge it. But at that moment, you needed help, and we gave it to you. It was the right thing to do, period. Everything else, your enemies, your deeds, that's no longer my story. I don't play your games. I simply did what I had to do as a person and as a mother." She falls silent, letting her words hang in the air. They sound like a sentence, but a merciful sentence, full of a strange, stern wisdom. Taeyong is silent. Her words strike him deep inside, where threats, flattery, and power have never reached. He's always believed that every action has a price, an ulterior motive, a benefit. But here, no. Here was the pure, simple truth. Helping for the sake of helping, for the sake of teaching a little girl a lesson, for the sake of remembering his dead brother. This purity stuns him. In his tangled, dirty world, it glows like that very nightlight in the hallway, faintly, but inexorably. He can't find what to say. He simply nods. He nods, realizing that he's received something much more than just salvation from death. He's learned a lesson about how, it turns out, there are still things in the world that are done simply because they're right. A few strange, quiet days follow. Taeyong continues to live on the living room couch. His strength is slowly returning. The pain in his side subsides to a tolerable dull heaviness. The abrasions are healing. He's learning to exist in this small world. He wakes to the sound of children's laughter and the smell of breakfast. He eats a simple meal at the communal table, listening to Tammy talk about her daycare activities. He helps out as best he can, washing the dishes while Yannicka is busy with her daughter, or holding the door while they bring in the groceries. He does this silently, and Yannicka accepts his help just as silently, without thanks, as if it were something she takes for granted. He observes their routine. In the morning, Yannicka takes Tammy to preschool, then goes to work. She's a shift mechanic at a small auto repair shop nearby. In the evening, they return together, do homework, play, and have dinner. Everything is simple, measured, predictable. For Taeyong, this predictability is a revelation. He's never had a day he could predict from the morning. Here, every day is similar to the one before, and this similarity brings a strange sense of peace. He begins to distinguish the sounds of the house, the creak of a neighbor's stairs, the precise time the light turns on in the window across the street, the mailman's morning route. He barely talks about himself. Yannicka doesn't ask. Sometimes in the evening, after Tammy falls asleep, they sit in silence. Sometimes they turn on the TV. Sometimes Yannicka mends or sews something. Taeyong simply sits, and his brain, accustomed to constructing complex schemes and calculating risks 10 steps ahead, gradually switches off. Instead, he listens to the ticking of the clock and feels his body healing. One evening, on the 4th or 5th day of his stay, he and Yannicka are sitting in the kitchen. Tammy is already asleep. It's been dark outside for a long time. The rain has given way to a cold drizzle. Yannicka is looking through some bills. Taeyong is simply looking out the window at the dark street. Suddenly, a black car slowly, almost crawling, glides down the street. Not old or beat up, like most of the cars in the area. New, expensive, with tinted windows. It moves without any apparent purpose. Doesn't stop, simply creeps past their window, like a shark in murky water. The headlights snatch wet asphalt and utility poles from the darkness, and for a second, the beam glides across their curtains. Taeyong freezes. Every muscle in his body instantly tenses. He can't see faces, but he knows this model, this color, this driving style. This is the car of his people, or rather, of those who now consider themselves his people, after the attempt at the port. The car slowly disappears into the darkness at the end of the street. A thick, sticky silence hangs in the room. Taeyong doesn't move. He's listening for the sound of the engine to return, to stop somewhere nearby. Yanika looks up at him. She sees how his face has changed, how it has become stony, sharp, how all the relaxation of the last few days has disappeared. That same look has returned to his eyes, hard, assessing, dangerous. What? She asks quietly, putting the papers aside. A black car, he says quietly, through clenched teeth, not taking his eyes off the window. It just drove by, slowly. They're here. Who are they? Her voice remains even, but a metallic note appears in it. Those who want to find me. My former partners. Those who set that trap at the port. He finally turns his head to face her. His face is pale. They're looking for me. They're combing the neighborhoods. Sooner or later, they'll find this house. They might have already. They could have seen your SUV on surveillance cameras somewhere, asked questions at the workshop. There are many ways. Now Yanika's face also becomes serious. She doesn't look scared, but her eyes narrow. She quickly analyzes. Did they see you here? Through the window? No. The curtains are drawn. But if they pass by again, if they start following, he doesn't finish the sentence. The consequences are clear. He remembers his own methods. Find a weak spot. Apply pressure. And the weak spot here is Yanika and Tammy. His own anxiety is instantly replaced by another, much more acute one. Now the danger isn't threatening him. He's used to it. It's threatening them. Two people who did nothing but save him, who live their simple, honest lives. The thought that something could happen to them because of him makes his blood run cold. It's a new and unbearable feeling. They won't touch you if I'm gone, he says quickly, almost convincing himself. I need me. If I'm not here, there's no reason for them to come back. He gets up from the kitchen chair. His body aches, but the adrenaline is already dulling the pain. He has to act, now. I'm leaving, he says, looking at Yannika. Today, now, before they start narrowing the circle. Yannika also stands up. She doesn't argue, doesn't shout, doesn't ask him to stay. She looks at him with the same gaze she used when she looked at the overturned car. Evaluatively, practically. Where will you go? She asks simply. You're not fully recovered yet. You have no money, no change of clothes, other than what I gave you. That's not important, he snaps. What's important is that they find me somewhere else, far away from here. The sooner I disappear from this area, the safer it is for you. The police? She suggests, though there's doubt in her voice. He laughs briefly, soundlessly, bitterly. The police aren't on my side in this, or on theirs. Either way, it's not a solution. He takes a step toward the living room to gather his few belongings, that same old t-shirt and pants. Thank you for everything, for the shelter, for the treatment, for the peace. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. Yanika disappears into her bedroom. Taeyong thinks she's simply leaving him to go. He can't even think of asking for anything more. He's already taken too much from them. But a minute later, she returns. In one hand, she holds a wad of used but neatly folded bills. A small amount, but obviously significant to her. In the other, she holds an old but warm and durable dark blue jacket with a thick lining. Take them, she says, handing them both to him. Taeyong looks at the money, then at the jacket, then at her face. He wants to refuse, to say he has no right, but he sees in her eyes the same thing he saw at the port, an unwavering determination to see this through to the end. She started helping him, and she'll help him until the very end, even if that end means him leaving. I can't, he says quietly. You can, she objects, just as quietly but firmly. You need food and a roof over your head for at least a couple of days until you find somewhere to go. And it's cold outside. You won't survive in just a t-shirt. This isn't a gift. This is A logical conclusion. She places the money on the table next to him and hangs her jacket over the back of his chair. Then she goes to the refrigerator, takes out a bag, and quickly puts in a few sandwiches wrapped in plastic, an apple, and a bottle of water. Food for the first time, she says, handing over the bag. Taeyong stands, unable to move. This practical, silent concern descends upon him with renewed vigor. She thinks about everything. Even now, when he has brought a threat into her home, she continues to help, not out of pity, but because it is the right thing to do. He slowly takes the money and puts it in his pants pocket. Then he puts on his jacket. It's a little big, but very warm. It smells of laundry detergent and home. Then he picks up the bag of food. "Thank you," he says, and it's the only word he can squeeze out. It contains all the weight of his gratitude and all the bitterness of his guilt. Yannicka says in a businesslike tone, "Through the courtyard. There's less light there. I'll show you, and try not to come back to this area. Ever." He nods. She approaches the back door leading to the small courtyard, pulls back the bolt, and quietly opens it. Outside, the air smells damp and cold. The darkness seems absolute. Taeyeon steps out the door, stops, turns around. She stands framed by the door, illuminated by the kitchen light. "Tell Tammy I said thank you," he says. Yannicka nods. "I'll pass it on. Be careful, Taeyeon." He stares at her for another second, trying to imprint this image on his memory. A strong, calm woman in the doorway of her home, who, without hesitation, saved him and, without hesitation, lets him go. Then he turns and disappears into the cold darkness of the night. Yannicka quietly closes the door and turns the key. She stands there for a moment, listening to the silence outside. Then she turns off the kitchen light and goes to check on Tammy, who is sleeping. Her face is inscrutable, but her eyes are filled with deep, troubled thought. The morning was quiet and gray. Taeyong was already standing by the door, wearing her old jacket, money in his pocket, and a bag of lunch in his hand. Yannicka looked at him silently, her face unreadable. Everything was decided. He was simply waiting for Tammy to leave for kindergarten, so as not to alarm her with his sudden disappearance. Tammy emerged from the bedroom, already dressed in her pink jacket and carrying a small backpack. She paused when she saw Taeyong at the door. Her intelligent eyes quickly flickered from his face to the bag, to her mother's tense expression. Her childish perception had caught something important. "Are you leaving?" she asked directly, without preamble. Taeyong dropped to one knee to be level with her. A pain stabbed his side, but he ignored it. "Yes, baby, I have to go. My business awaits," he said as gently as possible. Tammy came closer. She didn't cry, didn't try to persuade him to stay. She looked at him seriously, just like she had at the port. "But you're still in pain," she noted. "It's almost over. Thanks to your mom." He nodded towards Yannicka. The girl hesitated for a second, then stepped forward decisively and hugged him. Her small arms barely closed around his back. She pressed her cheek against the rough fabric of his jacket. "Be careful, sir," she said quietly but clearly, right into his chest. The same words her mother had spoken. "Out there." This simple, childish gesture, these words, broke the last inner barrier. Taeyong froze, afraid to move, lest he frighten this fragile moment. Then he carefully, almost weightlessly, placed his hand on her head. "I will," he whispered. "I promise. And you, be a good girl for Mom." Tammy pulled away and nodded. Her expression held the same focused responsibility as Yannicka's. She took her mother's hand, ready to go. She turned around one last time and waved. Then the door closed, and he was left alone in the quiet apartment, the air still filled with the scent of breakfast and baby shampoo. He left through the back door 10 minutes after them. He needed to be sure they were already far away. The cold air stung his face. He zipped up his jacket all the way and raised the hood. The neighborhood was waking up. Doors were slamming somewhere. Someone was starting a car. He walked quickly, but didn't run, trying not to attract attention. His gaze automatically scanned his surroundings. Parked cars, windows, passers-by. Old habits returned instantly. But now, a new feeling mingled with his cold calculations, an urgent need to ward off danger. He turned the corner and stepped onto the next street. He stopped, pretended to adjust his shoelace, and stole a glance back. Their house was almost invisible now, but from one window, the kitchen, a warm yellow light still streamed through the pre-dawn gloom, the same light that had greeted him every morning for the past few days. He looked at that light. It was a small, silent testimony to a world that didn't belong to him, A world of simple breakfasts, children's drawings, quiet evenings, and unconditional help. He stood in the cold twilight, and there, behind the glass, remained warmth, safety, and two lives that he now had to protect in the only way he knew how, by disappearing. Taeyong turned abruptly and walked away, not looking back. He was walking into his night, which for him was only just beginning. But the image of that window with its warm light was imprinted on his memory like a tattoo. His return to his old life was like stepping into icy water, gradually, with an unbearable chill penetrating every cell. The first thing he did was find his own, not those who had betrayed him, but those who remained in the shadows, who were loyal to him personally, not to money or position. The meeting took place at an abandoned construction site. There were only two of them. They nodded silently, seeing his pale, haggard face and the simple, unfamiliar jacket he wore. No questions, just a brief report. Who had defected to the conspirators? Who had remained neutral? Who had disappeared? His organization was falling apart, disintegrating. Taeyong listened, his face a stony mask, his insides clenched with the familiar rage, the desire to retaliate. But now, overlaid with it, was another thought. The thought of a black car slowly creeping past a quiet house. He gave orders, clear, firm, but every order now held a hidden calculation. Minimize noise, avoid open warfare on the streets, act with precision, through negotiations, through pressure rather than brute force. His men exchanged surprised glances, but obeyed. He returned to his empty, luxurious apartment in the city center. Everything here was expensive, cold, and impersonal. Glass, metal, rare woods, nothing superfluous, nothing alive. The silence here was echoing and oppressive, not soothing. He took a shower, looked at his almost healed abrasions in the mirror, and before his eyes a picture appeared. Yannicka, bent over him, with a damp cloth and antiseptic on their old sofa. He sat at the huge, empty desk, reviewing reports, plotting how to regain control. Numbers, names, threats, opportunities, but his thoughts stubbornly drifted. He remembered the taste of those simple pancakes, the sound of Tammy's laughter from the next room, Yannicka's calm, tired face in the light of the desk lamp, the ticking of that clock. He caught himself, in the midst of an important conversation over a secure line, his gaze lingering on the window, not on the skyscrapers beyond, but simply on the glass. And he saw again that other window, with its warm light, still there. In that quiet neighborhood he now had no way to reach. Things were gradually improving for him. He acted smarter, more cunningly than before. Some part of him, sharp and ruthless, worked like a Swiss watch. But another part, new and quiet, was constantly present in the background. It didn't interfere with his work. It was simply there, like a subdued melody that couldn't be turned off. It reminded him that there was another way to live, that there was more to the world than struggle and control, but also simple caring, that you could help not because it was profitable, but because it was right. And sometimes, deep in the night, when the city outside the window grew quiet, he would go up to his huge panoramic window, look at the sea of cold lights, and try to guess in what point of the darkness that very small and warm yellow light was burning. Tough decisions. The people who had betrayed him weren't about to give in. They controlled key financial flows and felt secure. Taeyong would have responded with a barrage of violence, street brawls that would have left scars on the pavement and on people. That's how it always was. But now, as he gave orders, Tammy's face appeared in his mind's eye, her serious eyes when she said, "Be careful, sir," or Janica's calm, tired gaze when she explained why she was helping. He thought of that warm light in the window, which he had dragged with him into the darkness. So his strategy changed. He began to act like a shadow, not a hammer. He didn't declare open war. Instead, he began methodically buying off their people, not with threats, but with money and security guarantees. Those who couldn't be bought off, he isolated, not physically, but informationally. Through hackers, he found compromising data on their relatives, their hidden accounts, their small but crucial weaknesses. This data was then anonymously leaked to competitors or law enforcement agencies. People began to fight for their privacy and lost interest in fighting for someone else's cause. One day, one of the main conspirators was brought to him, young, bold, with blazing eyes, the very one who had likely given the order at the port. His men were awaiting the order. The old logic demanded an exemplary reprisal to instill fear in others. Taeyong stared for a long time at the man, who looked at him with defiance and fear. He saw himself in him several years ago. Foolish, confident in his invulnerability, Taeyong said quietly to his men. They were dumbfounded. The prisoner's eyes also widened. But boss, I know what he did, Taeyong interrupted. His voice was icy, but there was no anger in it. Let him go, and tell everyone who sent him, I won't fight them, but if even one person from their team comes within a kilometer of the area where I was found, or the people who live there, I'll wipe out all their accounts. I'll dismantle their entire network within a week, and they won't just be poor, they'll be useless. Understood? His tone was so calm and confident that it sounded more terrifying than any threat of violence. He spoke not of murder, but of the complete, total destruction of their world, their status, their everything. This was a new kind of cruelty, more sophisticated and irrevocable. The prisoner was released. He left, stunned. The news spread instantly. It worked. A threat aimed not at their lives, but at their very purpose for existence, proved more effective. The conflict began to fade. The enemy hadn't been defeated in battle. They had been dismantled down to the last screw, without unnecessary noise, without gunshots in the streets that might attract attention and perhaps lead someone to that very apartment. Taeyong didn't become kind. He remained harsh and merciless, but his mercilessness became subtler, smarter. He learned to cut at the seams, not break bones, and every time he made such a decision, he felt a strange relief, as if he weren't simply winning a deal, but fulfilling some unspoken promise, a promise made in the silence of that living room. Smelling of tea and peace, Yanika and Tammy's life returned to its usual routine. In the morning, kindergarten and work. In the evening, homework, dinner, and sometimes cartoons on the weekends. The incident at the port and the strange white-haired guest gradually began to resemble a strange, vivid dream. They hardly spoke about it, but sometimes, while drawing, Tammy would depict a dark car and a small figure next to it, and Yanika, passing by that very sofa, would pause for a second to look at it. They didn't know that their lives were now surrounded by an invisible barrier. Yanika didn't notice that their neighborhood had suddenly become much quieter. The petty hooligans, who sometimes made noise near the entrance, had vanished. One day, she got a flat tire, and 5 minutes later, a silent man from the neighboring garage approached and offered help, as if he'd been expecting it. She chalked it up to chance. She had no idea that the auto repair shop where she worked had received an unexpectedly large order from a new transportation company, an order that provided stability and a small bonus for all the employees, including her. The shop owner simply scratched his head, amazed at the unexpected success. Tammy didn't know that her preschool had unexpectedly won a grant for new playground equipment, or that the city's Child Care Safety Commission had suddenly shown a heightened interest in her neighborhood, inspecting and replacing all the old swings and roundabouts. One evening, returning from after-school care, Tammy slipped and fell, scraping her knee. Before she could even cry, a woman with a dog walking by approached her. Her bag turned out to contain a children's bandage with teddy bears. Anything can happen. I always carry one. The woman smiled and helped Tammy up. Yanika, who ran up a minute later, only nodded gratefully. She didn't see how the woman, having walked around the corner, took out her phone and quietly said, "The incident is closed. The girl is fine." Taeyong never showed up on their radar. He didn't call, didn't write, didn't send messages. He understood that his presence in their lives was the greatest threat, but he could create a safe environment around them, like an engineer who strengthens the banks of a river so it flows peacefully within its bed. He assigned a small, most reliable part of his now restored organization to this task. Their job was simple: observe from a distance, nip any potential threats in the bud, discreetly assist with minor everyday problems, ensure that no shadow of his old world seeped into their neighborhood. He could easily pay for this work. Sometimes, usually late at night, a short report would land on his desk. One line: "Everything is calm, no incidents. The girl performed at the matinee. The mother got a promotion." Or simply, "Life is going on as usual." He read these lines, and something inside him, taut as a string, relaxed slightly. He looked at the city outside the window, at the sea of cold lights, and no longer searched for that lonely, warm flame. He knew it was burning, and he knew it was guarding his peace. This was his new, quiet duty, his most important task, a task that no one knew about except him and a couple of faceless shadows keeping watch, far from the warm light of their window. They simply lived, and that was his greatest victory. 2 months have passed. One day, Yanika returned from work to find a plain white envelope in her mailbox, among the counters and advertisements. There was no stamp or address, just her name, written in a clear, unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a photograph, a high-quality black and white one. It depicted that same abandoned pier, but now it looked different. Instead of a pile of rusty metal and broken glass, there was a cleared area. New lanterns stood around the edges. In the center, a simple but sturdy bench made of light wood, and a small sign on a post, visible in the photo if you looked closely. A place where people learn to dock. No caption, no words, just a photo. Yanika stared at her for a long time, standing in the entryway. Then she slowly went up to her room and placed the envelope on the kitchen table. She didn't show it to Tammy. It was a message for her. She understood everything. That same evening, Taeyong was sitting in his office. Things were almost settled. The organization, though reduced, was functioning smoothly and quietly. The new rules had become the norm. He was reviewing the financial report when he received a call. "Boss, we have a minor emergency," came the voice from the phone. It was one of those monitoring the area. "A car has pulled up to the house, social services, investigating an anonymous tip about poor conditions for a child." Taeyong felt his insides tighten like a string. The same old dirty tactics, pressure through official channels. He mentally ran through his list of enemies, who still had connections, and the desire to take revenge in this way. "Don't touch them," he ordered quietly but clearly. "Just watch, and find out who exactly from social services has arrived. Names, everything." He hung up and walked over to the window. His face was cold in the glass's reflection. He couldn't simply intimidate these people. These weren't bandits. These were bureaucrats with paperwork, but he could operate within their purview. An hour later, he had all the information, the names of the two inspectors, their department numbers, even a brief job description. He issued new orders, calm, precise. The next day, the two inspectors encountered inexplicable difficulties. One accidentally deleted all emails related to the case, including the anonymous tip. The other was suddenly summoned by his supervisor for an urgent, unfounded reprimand for previous minor violations. When they tried to return to the same address, their car wouldn't start, and when they called a taxi, the dispatcher missed and sent the car to the other side of the city. The inspection vanished like smoke before it even began. The inspectors, faced with mystical obstacles and sudden problems on all fronts, gave up. The anonymous tip turned out to be a false alarm. The case was closed. Yanika never found out that anyone had come to their house. She only noticed that the neighbor downstairs, always disgruntled with everyone, and likely the one who would have written such a signal, had suddenly and abruptly moved to a different neighborhood. Yanika chalked it up to luck. Taeyong, however, didn't feel triumphant when he received the case's closure report. He felt tired and responsible. As long as he lived and held power, this invisible war for their peace would continue. He had to be constantly on guard. He began to think about a more long-term solution. A week later, Yanika received an official letter from a charitable foundation for children of medical and social workers. The letter stated that, based on her previous experience working at a hospice and her current situation, single mother, stable, employment, she had been approved for a special scholarship for distance learning. The scholarship offered a refresher course for social workers with the prospect of employment at a well-funded children's center in a quiet area. The scholarship covered both tuition and some operating expenses. It was legal, clean, and unquestionable. The foundation was real. The scholarships were legitimate. Her candidacy was simply considered first. Yanika sat with this letter and cried, quietly, so Tammy wouldn't hear. This was a chance. A real chance to change her life for the better, to give her daughter even more stability. She spent a long time checking the documents, calling the numbers provided. Everything was clear. She submitted the application. Taeyong, upon learning that she had agreed, allowed himself a rare, barely noticeable smile. It was a good move. It strengthened their own lives from within, making them less vulnerable. Now Yanika would have an official, respected profession, connections, and the protection of a diploma and a contract. It was the best armor. Another week passed. Tammy was getting ready for the autumn festival at the kindergarten. They had to bring a craft, a harvest basket. Janica, tired after her shift, bought some colored cardboard and glue, but she was desperately short on time. The next morning, when Yanika went out to take out the trash, she saw a neat bag by the door. Inside was a beautiful, sturdy wicker basket, not store-bought, but clearly handmade, and several artificial, yet very realistic, fruits and vegetables. A perfect craft. No note, nothing. Her upstairs neighbor, going out to get a newspaper, said, "Oh, this must be from that nice woman from the Community Services Commission. They came by recently, asking how they could help families with children." Yannicka took the basket. It was warm to the touch. She brought it home and showed it to Tammy. The girl was absolutely delighted. "Mom, it's magical! Look how beautiful," Yannicka said quietly, looking out the window at the dawn of an ordinary gray day. "It seems we have quiet helpers." Taeyong was listening to the final report at the time. One of his men, the one who had once driven a taxi and had a knack for hands, had woven the basket himself, on his own initiative. He'd learned of the problem from the wife of the kindergarten teacher, with whom his wife sometimes drank coffee. "It's a small thing, boss. Forgive me for acting on my own authority," he said over the phone. "But I have a daughter myself. I was just imagining it." "Good job," Taeyong said simply. "Thank you." He hung up. It was quiet in his luxurious, cold apartment. But that silence was no longer empty. It was filled with a quiet knowledge. The knowledge that somewhere out there, many kilometers away, two people lived. A girl who was probably right now carrying her new basket to kindergarten, beaming with pride. And a woman who was perhaps looking at that photograph of the pier and realizing something. He couldn't be part of their world. His place was here, in this silence, from which he built invisible walls around their happiness. This was his new role, his quiet, eternal service. The price for that sip of water in a dark trap, for a warm blanket on the sofa, for the trusting eyes of a child, and for the glance of a woman who didn't pass by. And he paid this price without regret, day after day. Time passed. 3 months, half a year. For Tammy, the white-haired Sir became a character from a nearly forgotten fairy tale. Sometimes she thought of him when she saw black cars on the street, or when she was scared in the dark. She whispered, "Be careful, sir," just like she had once told him. She felt like it was a spell that protected him wherever he was. Her mother didn't talk about him, but she didn't forbid her from thinking about him either. Yannicka enrolled in courses. The studies were difficult, but she caught herself thinking that this was the first step forward she'd taken in many years. Not for survival, but for the future. Sometimes she felt as if someone was invisibly clearing the way for her. A difficult teacher would suddenly change his anger to mercy. Urgent housework would somehow proceed surprisingly quickly when it was time to study. She thanked her good fortune and tried not to think about where it came from. One late fall day, Yannicka spotted a new car in the yard. Not a black, expensive one, but a regular gray one, with an antenna on the roof. A man was sitting in the car, writing something down. He didn't look threatening, but he was clearly being watched. An old worry lurched deep inside. She tightened her grip on Tammy's hand and quickly led her into the entrance. That evening, Taeyong received a message. New observer. Not ours. Not theirs. A private detective. The client is Yannicka's sister's ex-husband. Inquiring about the child's living conditions. Wants to file for a custody review. Taeyong clenched his fists. Family squabbles. The dirtiest and most unpredictable things. His methods of pressuring the gangsters weren't working here. He needed to be more subtle. He gave the order. Find this ex-husband. That's it. No threats. Find his greatest weakness. The information arrived 2 days later. The ex-husband, a poor, low-level employee, was an avid gambler, not at the casino, but at the bookies, and he owed a large sum to semi-criminal bookmakers. He carefully concealed the debt. Taeyong acted quickly. Through a chain of intermediaries, the debt was purchased from bookmakers. The next day, a very polite lawyer came to see the ex-husband. He introduced himself as a representative of the new creditor. He didn't demand money right away. He offered to forget about the debt, in exchange for a signed promise to cease any attempts to interfere in the lives of Yannicka and Tammy and never mention their existence in court or any other instance. The man didn't believe it at first. Then he was delighted. Then he was scared. Who was paying for his silence? And why? But the alternative, ruin and problems with dangerous people, was worse. He signed out the papers. The private detective received a call from his client, terminating the case. The gray car disappeared from the yard forever. Yannicka never learned of the course of this silent war. She merely noticed that the disturbing shadow had passed. She caught her breath. Life returned to its calm. On New Year's Eve, Tammy had a matinee at her preschool. Yannicka, standing by the Christmas tree and filming her daughter on her phone, saw a man in the far corner of the hall. He was wearing a building security uniform and was looking not at the stage but around the perimeter. For a second, their gazes met. He was a stranger, but he nodded almost imperceptibly to her, as if to a coworker. Then he turned away. Yannicka felt a strange calm, as if someone else was also keeping an eye on things in this hall. That same night, Taeyong watched a short video sent to him. Tammy, dressed as a snowflake, was reciting a poem. Then the camera caught Yannicka in a crowd of parents. She was smiling, a genuine, tired, but happy smile. He turned off the video. The office was silent. He had fulfilled his promise. They were safe. Their world was protected. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He didn't need gratitude. He didn't need presents. This knowledge was enough for him, and the quiet certainty that somewhere in the city that very warm light burned. And as long as it burned, his own dark and complex life had meaning. Not the meaning of conquest, but the meaning of protection. The most important thing he had ever found in his life, and lost in order to keep.